They say a man ain't supposed to cry, but the first time Elijah watched his son cross the finish line, arms stretched wide, wind slapping that jersey like a flag, he felt tears in his throat. The kind that sit deep, quiet, the kind you don't speak on, but never forget. Elijah Brooks wasn't the kind of man who said a lot. He worked with his hands, talked with his eyes, taught his son to change the oil in a cart before he taught him how to tie a tie. Not because he didn't care about the tie, but because he knew the car might break down on a dark road somewhere. And if you black, you better not be stranded. Welcome to Injustice Brow, and this is Mark Joie. If this story already touches something in you, take a moment, subscribe, comment below. Your voice matters, and in stories like this, silence is the real enemy. Elijah had been through enough storms to recognize peace when it came, and peace, for him, was Marcus. 17, on a roll, ran like his mama, thought like his daddy, didn't drink, didn't chase girls, always had his headphones in, always scribbling poems in the back of math class like they were secrets the world wasn't ready for. He didn't have much, but he had dreams, and Elijah was holding the line to make sure nobody took them. Their house was small, paint peeling off the porch, lawn could have used a trim, but inside, there was laughter. Marcus cooked dinner twice a week, tacos on Tuesdays, spaghetti on Fridays. He said the food tasted better when you made it with someone who raised you. Sometimes, at night, Elijah would sit on the edge of his bed and watch Marcus sleep from the cracked hallway door. Not in a weird way, just in that way that only a father who's seen too much of the world can understand. You watch because you know peace is fragile. You watch because you know what waits on the other side of tomorrow. He remembered the promise he made to his wife right before cancer took her. Raise him strong, but gentle. He took it serious, taught Marcus how to fix a radiator, how to speak without raising his voice, how to keep his hands visible when the police drive by. Not because he was paranoid, because he was black, and in Georgia, that's enough. Marcus used to joke that his dad was old school cautious, but he listened. He always listened. There was something about that week, though, that quiet before the sky cracked. Elijah couldn't explain it, just this feeling in his chest that the air was holding its breath. The night before it happened, they were sitting on the porch, legs up, Kool-Aid sweating in the cups. Marcus said, "You ever feel like something big's coming, but you don't know if it's good or bad?" Elijah smiled. "Yeah," he said, "that's life, son. Storm don't knock. It just shows up." He didn't know it'd show up the very next day, wearing a badge, with cuffs to tie it for a 17-year-old boy. He didn't know that the moment Marcus left for school the next morning was the last time he'd ever see that version of his son, the version that was still free. Marcus wasn't even running that day. That's what got Elijah the most. His son wasn't running. He was walking, backpack slung low, hoodie up, AirPods in. It was a Friday. He had a meet coming up, probably thinking about what time his dad would get off work so they could hit the track together. But none of that mattered. Not in that town. Not in that skin. The police report would later say that Marcus matched a general description. No other details, just general, 6-foot black teenager, athletic build. That's it. In a town that had hundreds of black teenagers, one white officer decided Marcus was a threat. The moment came quiet. 1 minute he's walking. The next, a cruiser cuts the corner fast, too fast. Tires bite the gravel near the sidewalk. Marcus turns his head, confused. That's when the door slams open. The cop is already yelling, "Hands up, don't move." Marcus freezes, hands lift. "I'm just walking home." He tries, but it's too late. The officer grabs him, spins him, slams him face first into the hood. Handcuffs snap. Marcus screams out. He doesn't resist, just panics. And just like that, the story is written. Black suspect attempted to flee, became combative, struck officer. Not a body cam in sight. By the time Elijah's phone rang, the voice on the other end wasn't kind. It wasn't calm. It was cold. "This is Officer Denton with the Oak Ridge Police Department. Your son has been taken into custody. You need to come down to the station." No explanation, no context, just steel in the voice and a long, empty pause before the click. Elijah dropped the wrench right there in the shop, left the car half open, grease on his hands, heart running faster than his feet. The station wasn't but 6 minutes away, but it felt like 1,000 miles. He got there just as they were bringing Marcus in through the side door, face bruised, lip busted, one of his sneakers missing, still cuffed. Like he was some kind of animal. Elijah ran forward. "Hey, that's my son. What the hell is going on?" A second officer stepped in front of him, hand on his belt. "Sir, I need you to back up." "Elijah Brooks, that's my son, Marcus. He's 17. He didn't do nothing." Marcus tried to look back, tears in his eyes, but the officer pulled him forward. "He assaulted an officer," the voice said flatly, and that was it. That word, assaulted. Once it's out there, it sticks like tar. Doesn't matter what really happened. Doesn't matter if the boy had never been in trouble, had no record, never even raised his voice in school. All that mattered now was a white man in uniform said he felt threatened. Later, Elijah would sit in a holding room, fluorescent lights humming overhead. A young officer with too much badge and not enough sense read off the charges, like he was listing groceries. Felony assault on a peace officer, resisting arrest, disturbing the peace. Elijah leaned forward. "Are you serious? This is a kid walking home from school." The officer shrugged. If he cooperated, this wouldn't have happened. Cooperated. That word made Elijah want to flip the damn table. But he didn't, because one wrong move, and they'd bury his name under the same headline. He waited. Hours passed. They let him see Marcus once, in a gray room with a ticking clock and a sheet of plexiglass between them. Marcus tried to speak, but couldn't. His voice cracked like his spirit had cracked first. Elijah pressed his hand to the glass. "I'm here, son. I'm not going nowhere." That night, Elijah sat in his truck outside the station long after they told him to leave. Hands on the wheel, engine off. The town around him still moved cars, people, porch lights coming on, like nothing had changed. But everything had. He didn't have a lawyer. He didn't have a plan. All he had was truth. And in that town, truth wasn't stronger than a badge. Not yet. They say the wheels of justice turn slow, but for Elijah, it felt like they didn't turn at all. He found a lawyer, a young brother named Tyrell Wade, fresh out of law school, sharp, hungry, not afraid to speak plain. First time they met, Tyrell looked Elijah in the eye and said, "This case should be open and shut. Your son didn't do anything wrong." Elijah wanted to believe that, but believing don't mean much in a courtroom where truth has to wrestle power, and power never plays fair. The first court date came fast. Marcus was marched in like a criminal, shackled, jumpsuit to big. He looked older somehow, not just tired, changed. That kind of quiet you only see in kids who've already learned that the world don't see them as kids anymore. The DA didn't even blink, just laid it out, cold and clean. Your client struck an officer, resisted, caused a public scene. The officer suffered minor injuries and was traumatized in the line of duty. Tyrell asked for the body cam footage. The prosecutor nodded like she was being generous. 2 days later, they got a heavily redacted copy, blurry, shaky, half-muted. Audio. The most important 10 seconds were gone. Technical error, they said. The nearby gas station had a security camera too. That footage, inconclusive. Witnesses, there were some at first. A grocery store clerk who said she saw Marcus get grabbed. A woman on the sidewalk who said the boy didn't fight back. But by the time subpoenas went out, those folks stopped. Returning calls. One had moved out of state. Another said she didn't remember clearly. People got scared, or bought off, or warned. Tyrell leaned back in his chair during one late-night call and said, "They're closing ranks, Elijah. This is how it goes when the badge is part of the story." Then came the offer, a plea deal. Drop the charges from felony to misdemeanor. In exchange for time served, probation, and mandatory counseling. No trial. No chance to prove innocence. Just sign the paper and get it over with. Tyrell looked at Elijah, said, "It's not justice, but it'll keep your son out of jail." Elijah stared at the words, assault, resisting, disorderly conduct. If Marcus signed, it'd follow him for the rest of his life. Scholarships, gone. Job interviews, stained. That label criminal branded on a boy who never raised his hand to anyone. Elijah pushed the paper away. No, and just like that, the room got colder. You could feel it, like a shift in the wind. That moment when the system realizes you won't bow easy. The prosecutor's smile got tighter. Tyrell's voice got lower, and Elijah knew this wasn't just about law anymore. This was about making an example. Then the town turned. People he'd known for 20 years stopped waving, stopped speaking. The barber who used to cut Marcus's hair started canceling appointments. The pastor who came by when Elijah's wife passed stopped coming. He ran into one of his old army buddies at the store. "Elijah, man, I just stay out of politics these days. You know how it is." It wasn't politics, it was his son. And people were choosing sides like it was a game. One night, someone threw a rock through the window of the garage where Elijah worked. Just a rock. No note, no message, but it said enough, and still he didn't bend. Every night he'd drive past the courthouse, lights on, empty steps, metal detectors asleep. He'd sit there and wonder how many black fathers had done the same thing. How he sat in parked cars, gripping steering wheels, praying to a God who stayed quiet. He'd never felt more alone, but he wasn't broken, because he still believed in Marcus. He still remembered the boy who read poetry at the kitchen table, the kid who tied his shoes before school like he had somewhere important to be, the one who never gave the world a reason to be afraid of him. And Elijah wasn't about to let that boy get buried under a lie. He wasn't fighting just for a verdict. He was fighting for the right to be seen as human. Elijah hadn't thought about his father in years. Not really. Not beyond the usual memories, his voice, his tools, the way he always sat facing the door when they ate out, like he was waiting on trouble. But lately, in the thick of everything, those memories had started coming back like smoke, slow, heavy, hard to breathe through. He was 8 the first time he saw his daddy bleed, summer of '68. Georgia's sun burning down like it was mad at everybody. His father had taken him to a peaceful protest in town. Just signs, speeches, folks singing low under their breath. Nobody yelling, nobody throwing nothing, just people asking to be treated right. But the cops came anyway. Not many words, just batons. Elijah had been holding his father's hand one second, and the next, he was on the ground, watching boots move like thunder. His daddy's face twisted under a nightstick, blood on his shirt, on the street, on Elijah's own fingers when he reached out, not understanding why everything had gone so wrong so fast. They never talked about it, not once. His father came home, cleaned up, went back to work like nothing happened. That's how it was back then. You didn't cry. You didn't dwell. You learned how to live with a bruise. But that moment had stayed, buried, until now. Because when Elijah saw Marcus in the courtroom, hunched, silent, hands in cuffs, it was like he was staring at his father all over again. Not the man who bled, the man who survived. That's what hit him hardest. Not just the injustice, but the feeling that this was a cycle, a curse wrapped in skin and fear, passed down from father to son like a secret no one wanted but couldn't get back. He thought about all the things his father never said, how it felt to be beaten for standing still, never said how hard it was to walk past the same white men who did it, nod his head and keep his mouth shut so he could feed his family, never said what it meant to raise a black boy in a place where the rules could change, depending on who was watching. And now here Elijah was living it all over again, trying to shield his own son with the same silence. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe silence wasn't safety. Maybe it was surrender. He remembered once, when Marcus was 12, they got pulled over driving home from the movies. The officer said the taillight was out. It wasn't. But Elijah kept his hands on the wheel, spoke calm, showed his ID, told Marcus to stay quiet. Don't move. Don't speak unless spoken to. Afterward, Marcus asked why the cop looked at him. Like that. Elijah said, "It's just how it is." He hated those words the second they left his mouth, because that's what his father had told him, and it hadn't saved them. Now Marcus was caught in the same system, and Elijah knew if he stayed quiet, if he played it safe, if he let the fear decide what to say and when to say it, he'd be helping to bury his boy, just like silence buried his father. This wasn't just about Marcus. It was about every black father who had ever had to teach their son how to survive, instead of how to live. It was about breaking a pattern, even if it broke him. Elijah had always been a quiet man, but there comes a point when silence becomes a lie, and he wasn't about to lie for this system anymore. The day he decided to go public, it was raining, not a thunderstorm, just that steady southern rain that soaks through your clothes and makes everything feel heavier than it is. He stood on the courthouse steps with a picture of Marcus in his hands, his boy before the arrest. Bright smile, no bruises, no jail clothes, just a young man like any other. Except he wasn't treated like any other. Elijah didn't shout, He didn't rage. He just spoke. My son didn't do what they say he did, and I'm not leaving this spot until y'all listen. That was it. No fancy speech, no bullhorn, just truth. People walked past. Some stared, some didn't. But by the second day, others started showing up. Mothers, teachers, a few church folks. Even some kids from Marcus's track team. They held signs. They prayed. They stood in silence beside him, and the silence spoke louder than any chant could. By day 5, local news showed up. That's how he met Harasha Gaines, 28, sharp as glass, with a press badge and no fear. She'd grown up 3 towns over, said the story hit too close to home to ignore. She asked for the footage, asked for the police report, asked questions that made people shift in their seats. She didn't back down. She wasn't there to balance both sides. She came to tell the truth. Elijah invited her into his home, showed her Marcus's medals, his poems, the shirts folded in the laundry basket waiting for a boy who hadn't come home in months. This isn't a story, he told her. It's a life. She looked him in the eyes and said, then let's make them look at it. Ash's article dropped 3 days later, online first, then TV. Then it spread like wildfire. Local teen jailed after disputed arrest. Father claims targeted abuse. There were photos of Marcus, of the busted lip, of Elijah on those courthouse steps, soaked through, standing like a tree that had already decided not to fall. And with that came the pushback. Calls in the night. You're dividing the community. Notes slipped under his garage door. You're making things worse for your son. Anonymous threats, online slander, old customers vanishing like smoke. Then came the call from his boss. Elijah, you're a good man, but we just can't have this kind of attention. He was fired before he even hung up the phone, but Elijah didn't flinch. Losing a job, he'd lost worse. What he wasn't going to lose was his boy's dignity. He kept showing up, protested, marched, gave interviews, spoke at schools, told folks what really happened. How quickly innocence can be rewritten if the wrong person tells the story first. It was never about getting famous. It was about making the lie uncomfortable. Asha stuck with him. She covered every twist, every delay, every new excuse the DA made. She brought light into a place that had lived in shadow for too long. And through it all, Elijah stood firm, not as a hero, just a father, just a man tired of begging to be seen as human. It didn't come with a bang. No cameras, no crowds, no press conference, just a quiet letter in the mail. Charges dismissed. Lack of sufficient evidence. Case closed. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence, same as the day they took Marcus. Elijah read the letter twice, then set it down slow. He looked over at his son, sitting on the couch, hoodie pulled low, eyes darker than they used to be. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just nodded like someone who already knew how it would end. The truth had come out. The public pressure, the articles, the protests had forced their hand. But nobody was coming to say sorry. Nobody was being held accountable. Marcus was free, but not untouched. He didn't run track anymore. Said his legs didn't feel the same. Said every time he walked past a cop car, his stomach tightened. Said sleep was a stranger most nights. But he wrote again, pages and pages, of things he couldn't say out loud, poetry that cut deep, words that carried the weight of boys who survived. Elijah stood by him, not as a man who won, but as a man who never backed down. Because sometimes justice never shows up. Sometimes all you get is the truth and the right to say it out loud. And sometimes that's enough to keep your head up. Not a victory, not a loss, just dignity in the ashes. This is Mark Joie, and you've been watching Injustice Browning. If you feel this story, leave a comment, speak your truth, and subscribe for more stories the system tried to bury. Because silence didn't save us then, and it won't now.